Welcome, listener, to a profound journey into the very architecture of the human mind. Imagine, if you will, sitting in a quiet room, the weight of the world momentarily lifted from your shoulders, as we delve into one of the most controversial, deeply hidden, and ultimately liberating manuscripts of the 20th century. We are exploring Napoleon Hill's Outwitting the Devil, the secret to freedom and success. Before we begin, it is essential to understand the remarkable provenance of this work. Written in the year 1938, this manuscript was deemed so radical, so potentially disruptive to the established norms of society, that it was locked away by Hill's own family for over 70 years. His wife, fearing the backlash from organized religion and the potential ruin of his career, ensured it remained buried. It was not until decades later that the Napoleon Hill Foundation recognized its timeless, urgent message and brought it to light. What you are about to hear is not merely a self-help book. It is a psychological and spiritual masterclass, framed as a startling, almost courtroom-like interrogation between Napoleon Hill, whom the text refers to as Mr. Earthbound, and the devil himself. To truly grasp the magnitude of this conversation, we must first understand the man holding the pen. Napoleon Hill was not always the revered philosopher of success we know today. His journey was paved with profound adversity. After receiving a life-altering challenge from the industrial titan Andrew Carnegie to spend 20 years researching the causes of success and failure, Hill dedicated his life to this monumental task. Yet, he was not immune to the very failures he studied. He experienced periods of intense financial ruin, paralyzing indecision, and deep personal despair. The turning point came after a tragic event involving the murder of a business partner, which left Hill in hiding, consumed by a debilitating, self-generating morass of fear. It was during this darkest hour, while pacing around a schoolhouse in West Virginia, that Hill experienced a profound psychological shift. He discovered what he called his other self. This was not a mystical apparition, but rather the awakening of the faith-driven entity within his own mind, which had been dormant, suppressed by the fear-driven entity that had held him captive for over a year. This other self commanded him to take action, to demand his rightful place, and to complete his life's work. It was this hard-won mastery over his own mind that gave Hill the authority, the courage, and the lack of fear necessary to force the devil into a confession. As the interview commences, the devil makes a startling admission right from the outset. He claims to control 98% of the human population. When Hill questions this audacious claim, the devil clarifies his nature. He is not a mythical beast with a forked tongue and a spiked tail, nor does he reside in a fiery underworld. Instead, he describes himself as negative energy. He exists as the negative portion of the atom, occupying the unused space within the human mind. His domain is not the afterlife, but the here and now. He boasts that his greatest weapon, the primary tool he uses to ensnare humanity, is fear. Specifically, he cultivates the fear of poverty and the fear of death, planting these seeds so deftly that individuals believe these fears are their own natural creations. By keeping people terrified of lacking material resources or facing the unknown of death, he ensures they remain pliable, anxious, and entirely dependent on external validation, thereby surrendering their independent thought. This brings us to the cornerstone of the devil's strategy, a concept Hill terms drifting. If you wish to understand how the majority of people lose control of their destinies, you must understand drifting. A drifter is an individual who permits themselves to be influenced and controlled by circumstances outside of their own mind. They do not think for themselves, rather, they accept whatever life throws their way without protest or purpose. They hold opinions, but these opinions are not their own. They are supplied by the devil through the media, through societal pressure, and through unquestioned traditions. The devil explains that he initiates this habit of drifting in early childhood. He does this by manipulating the very institutions that are supposed to guide the youth: parents, public schools, and religious instructors. He notes, with a chilling sense of pride, that these well-meaning adults often unknowingly serve his purpose. They teach children to memorize facts rather than how to think independently. They instill a fear of hell or a fear of failure, effectively breaking down the child's innate power of independent thought before they even have the chance to develop it. Once a child learns to drift, to accept the thoughts of others as their own, the foundation for lifelong subjugation is laid. However, drifting alone is not enough to permanently seal a person's fate. This is where the devil employs a universal law of nature, a principle he calls hypnotic rhythm. To understand hypnotic rhythm, consider how a musician learns to play a melody. Through constant repetition, the notes and the rhythm become fixed in the mind and the muscles. Until playing the tune requires no conscious effort, it becomes a permanent habit. Hypnotic rhythm is the natural law that takes any thought, any habit, or any action that is repeated over time and makes it permanent. It is the whirlpool of nature. If a person drifts, if they consistently entertain negative thoughts, fear, or procrastination, hypnotic rhythm eventually takes over. It crystallizes those negative habits into the person's very character and destiny. Once a habit reaches the stage of hypnotic rhythm, it is incredibly difficult to break. The individual becomes permanently entangled in a web of their own making, bound to a life of mediocrity, poverty, or unhappiness, entirely unaware that they surrendered their freedom of thought. The devil gloats that nature does not discriminate. Hypnotic rhythm will just as readily make positive habits permanent, but because the majority of people are drifters, they inadvertently use this powerful law to cement their own failure. The interview takes a fascinating turn when Hill presses the devil on the role of failure and adversity. Common sense dictates that failure is the devil's ultimate victory, yet the devil reveals a profound paradox. He admits that failure is actually one of his greatest enemies when it is properly understood. You see, the devil relies on people accepting failure as a permanent, defining condition. When a person fails and quits, they drift into despair, and hypnotic rhythm locks them into that defeated state. But if an individual recognizes that every adversity carries with it the seed of an equivalent advantage, failure becomes a blessing in disguise. Adversity has the unique power to break the grip of negative hypnotic rhythm. It shatters old, ineffective habits and forces the individual to pause, reflect, and forge a new path. It is nature's way of resetting the board. The devil despises this because a person who learns from failure, who refuses to quit, is actively engaging their independent thought, thereby reclaiming their mind from his control. The great leaders of history, from Thomas Edison to Henry Ford, did not succeed because they avoided failure. They succeeded because they possessed the capacity to surmount failure without being discouraged, converting every defeat into a stepping stone for ultimate achievement. As we reach the midpoint of this profound exploration, we must pause to reflect on the trap that has been laid out before us. The devil's dominion is built on a foundation of fear, executed through the habit of drifting, and sealed permanently by the law of hypnotic rhythm. He thrives in the vacuum of an unoccupied mind, eagerly filling the space with negativity, procrastination, and reliance on the opinions of others. He even claims that organized religion and the traditional public school system are his most effective, albeit unwitting, allies, as they often prioritize conformity, memorization, and fear-based compliance over the development of critical, independent thinking. But do not despair, listener, for the very act of understanding this mechanism is the first step toward dismantling it. Napoleon Hill did not force this confession merely to expose the darkness. He did it to provide a definitive, actionable blueprint for liberation. The devil is compelled to reveal the exact formulas and principles that human beings can use to break his grip, reclaim their minds, and outwit him entirely. Welcome back, listener, as we continue our profound exploration into the architecture of human freedom. We have already unmasked the devil's primary weapons, the insidious habit of drifting, the inescapable law of hypnotic rhythm, and the paralyzing grip of fear. But Napoleon Hill did not force this confession merely to expose the darkness. He did it to provide a definitive, actionable blueprint for liberation. The devil himself is compelled to reveal the exact formulas and principles that human beings can use to break his grip, reclaim their minds, and outwit him entirely. This blueprint consists of 7 interwoven psychological and spiritual principles, which serve as the master key to self-determination. Let us walk through them together, not as abstract theories, but as practical, living tools you can apply to your own life starting today. The first and most foundational pillar of this liberation is definiteness of purpose. The devil openly admits that this is the one principle he fears most, because a mind anchored by a definite purpose is a fortress he cannot breach. Definiteness of purpose is not merely a fleeting wish or a vague desire. It is a conscious, unwavering policy adopted for all of life's affairs. When you know exactly what you want and have a definite plan to achieve it, you close the doors of your mind to negative influences. The devil thrives in the vacuum of an undecided mind, but he cannot occupy space that is already filled with focused intention. He confesses that while everyone is born with the privilege of being definite, the vast majority surrender this privilege through procrastination and indecision. To outwit him, you must train your mind to reach prompt decisions and change them only slowly, and with reluctance, and never without a definite reason. A weak plan applied with absolute definiteness will almost always succeed over a brilliant plan applied with hesitation, because definiteness attracts the very resources and opportunities needed to bring the plan to life. Closely tied to this is the second principle, mastery over self, or self-discipline. The devil reveals that you can never hope to master your environment or your destiny if you cannot first master your own physical and emotional appetites. He specifically targets 3 natural appetites that, when left uncontrolled, become his most effective tools for inducing drift. The first is the desire for excessive physical food. Overindulgence leads to auto-intoxication, a state where the body's elimination systems are clogged, poisoning the bloodstream and turning the brain into something resembling a wad of putty. A poisoned body cannot house a clear, decisive mind. The second, and perhaps most powerful, appetite is the desire for sex expression. The devil does not claim that sex itself is evil, rather, he exploits the uncontrolled dissipation of this immense creative energy. When this driving force is not mastered and transmuted into constructive professional or creative endeavors, it depletes the individual's magnetic energy, dulls the imagination, and leads inevitably to the habit of drifting. The third appetite is the habit of expressing loosely organized opinions. The person who talks too much, who guesses at facts rather than seeking them, and who volunteers uninvited criticisms, not only reveals their own plans to potential adversaries but also develops a grasshopper mind that jumps from one incomplete thought to another. True self-discipline requires that you govern these appetites, not by suppressing them, but by understanding, respecting, and redirecting their immense power toward your definite purpose. This brings us to the third principle, a profound paradox that the devil reluctantly confesses. Learning from adversity. You might assume that failure is the devil's ultimate victory, but he reveals that failure is actually a blessing in disguise, provided you refuse to accept it as permanent. Failure is a man-made circumstance, a state of mind that only becomes real when an individual surrenders to it. When adversity strikes, it performs a vital, natural function. It shatters the negative grip of hypnotic rhythm. It forces you to a dead end on your current path, compelling you to stop, reassess, and forge a new rhythm. The devil hates this because adversity strips away vanity and egotism, forcing the individual to test their true willpower and seek wisdom from sources outside their own limited experience. He admits that every single adversity carries with it the seed of an equivalent advantage. However, this seed will only germinate for the non-drifter, the individual who recognizes temporary defeat not as a signal to quit, but as a demand for greater effort and a new strategy. To sustain this resilience, you must apply the fourth principle, controlling your environmental influences. The devil explains that your environment consists of all the mental, spiritual, and physical forces that affect you, and the most critical component of this environment is the company you keep. Human beings are profoundly susceptible to absorbing the thought habits of those with whom they associate closely. The law of hypnotic rhythm will automatically force you to harmonize with the dominating influences of your surroundings. If you surround yourself with drifters, pessimists, and those who harbor negative thought habits, nature will inevitably weave those patterns into your own permanent reality. To outwit the devil, you must become the ruthless architect of your own environment. This is achieved by forming a mastermind alliance, a harmonious coordination of two or more minds working together toward a definite end. By deliberately choosing associates who bring positive, friendly, and harmonious influences, you create a protective, empowering environment that actively repels negative hypnotic rhythm. The fifth principle, time, is the great solidifier and the fourth dimension of this philosophy. Time works hand in hand with hypnotic rhythm to make your dominating thoughts permanent. Time does not discriminate, it is entirely neutral. If your mind is dominated by fear, poverty, and indecision, time will patiently and relentlessly solidify those negative habits into your permanent character and destiny. Conversely, if your mind is focused on faith, definite purpose, and constructive action, time will just as surely weave those positive thoughts into lasting success and wisdom. The devil notes that wisdom is not something you are born with, nor is it merely accumulated knowledge. True wisdom is the ability to relate yourself to nature's laws and to other people harmoniously, and this can only be ripened through the deliberate, positive use of time. The non-drifter uses time as a friend, allowing it to compound their positive habits, while the drifter allows time to become their executioner. This leads naturally to the sixth principle, harmony. Throughout the universe, natural law moves in an orderly manner, forcing everything within a given environment to become harmoniously related. The devil exploits this by ensuring that negative influences are forced into association with one another, just as positive influences are drawn together. If you find yourself in an environment of poverty, strife, or failure, nature will attempt to force you to harmonize with it unless you take decisive action. You cannot change the law of harmony, but you can change yourself. By establishing your own mental, spiritual, and physical environment through definiteness of purpose and a mastermind alliance, you command nature to harmonize your reality with your highest aspirations. Successful leaders understand this implicitly. They insist upon harmony among their associates because they know that discord is the breeding ground for the devil's favorite habit, drifting. Finally, we arrive at the seventh principle, which acts as the ultimate shield against all the devil's traps, caution. Next to the habit of drifting, the lack of caution is the most dangerous human trait. The drifter acts first and thinks later, if at all. They invite poverty by neglecting to understand the rules of finance. They invite illness by ignoring the laws of health. And they invite failure by failing to study the causes of past mistakes. The non-drifter, however, exercises rigorous, deliberate caution. They think their plans through before taking action, they make allowances for human frailties, and they check their work to ensure their wishes are fulfilled. The devil emphasizes that caution is not the same as fear. Fear paralyzes, but caution empowers. It is the thoughtful, strategic anticipation of obstacles and the proactive planning required to navigate around them. The person who exercises due caution in the choice of their associates, their occupation, and their daily habits effectively starves the devil of any opportunity to gain a foothold in their mind. As we draw this extraordinary confession to a close, listener, consider the profound simplicity of the solution. Napoleon Hill realized, after years of hardship, poverty, and temporary defeat, that he had been carrying the matches in his own pocket with which the fires of his adversity were being touched off. The water to extinguish those fires was always at his command. The devil's dominion is not maintained by supernatural magic, but by our own voluntary surrender of independent